Right. Well, I want to say thank you to everyone who is giving your time in our community, the volunteerism industry. So represented here, we have a lot of registrants and a variety of roles in your organizations. I would love if you all wouldn't mind orienting us. What type of role are you in? Whether you're in the fundraising department or you're in the volunteerism operations department, or perhaps you are a volunteer yourself. And aren't we all like sometimes we're like, I wear many different hats. So would love to just kind of get oriented, if you don't mind, kind of sharing your role and what you do. We have people from all different areas. So we're going to have double the donation customers already here. We're going to have Better Impact customers here. We're going to have Galaxy Digital customers here. We made a big announcement yesterday. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but Better Impact has acquired Galaxy Digital. So if you didn't know that announcement, it is public as of yesterday, so really excited. So we have Galaxy Digital customers here. And then we have customers of Double the Donation and Better Impact together. And then we have customers of Galaxy Digital and Double the Donation. So we have this nice mix, really excited. We'll talk a little bit more about that. If you did not know that Better Impact acquired Galaxy Digital, you don't know what that means, there is an announcement on our website. There's a video, and if you're a Better Impact customer or a Galaxy Digital customer, we did send out announcements. There's an email, FAQs, lots of great stuff. What it means is that we are shining the spotlight on the value of what you all are doing in your organization. And I wanted to kind of start off today's webinar talking about that. Like, our goal is to drive executive recognition to what it is that you all do. And I will start by sharing my screen so we could talk about that. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get kicked off. My name is Timothy. I am the president and CPO of Better Impact. And I have been here for about a year and a half, and we're really excited for the work we're doing. The thing that struck me the most is how much value is going on inside of volunteerism operations and how little funding is awarded to volunteerism operations. The actual data is roughly 30% of labor and 0.02% of budget. Now, it might be different for your organization, but like across the board. So we want to shine the spotlight on executive recognition on value within the volunteerism department. That is one of our big goals. And there's lots of different ways to do this, and we will talk about these different strategies. Some of our customers have done an extraordinary job on telling their story, on reporting their outcomes, on demonstrating a connection between fundraising and the volunteerism department. Or if there's not a known connection, perhaps it's just like the output of the work that volunteers are doing. And it's all in support of helping executives look for the opportunities in an organization. As an executive myself, I understand like part of what we do is we're like, okay, where is their potential value? Right? And we know, many of my customers know, as volunteer coordinators, volunteer managers, leaders of volunteers, you see the value, but then getting the executives to recognize that is wildly erratic, depending on the structure of your organization, the age of your volunteers and department, the history behind you, like the funding you have. So, from an executive, if opportunity A is harder to find than opportunity B, it might be overlooked. So if your opportunity is like too messy, like I can't really reconcile a value from my volunteerism operations, then it might get overlooked. And so we are here to say there's many different ways we can get the spotlight to tell the story properly. And we're going to talk about one of them today, which is dollars for doers. But before I do that, I already talked a little bit about Galaxy Digital. We've got lots of different customers from all over. Really excited about this. If this is an announcement to you, check your email. And what this looks like is now Better Impact acquiring Get Connected by Galaxy Digital. We are now I think the world's infrastructure for volunteerism as it relates to the technology. Lots of volunteer centers, over 400 volunteer centers. We've got 85,000 volunteer organizations collectively across the globe. We have millions of volunteers. I can I talk about how many millions. Well, define an active volunteer. That's something I want to talk to our customers about. Many, many millions of people who have volunteers and millions of people who are actively fulfilling shifts today. And so what this means is this is, I think, an inflection point in the world of volunteers and technology where we are investing heavily to be able to shine the spotlight on the value inside of volunteer operations. And we have many outcomes we want to get out of that. Let's talk about this from a Venn diagram, our favorite, right? We have, how do you determine volunteers and return on volunteer investment? I look at it in a few different ways. We've got the value from the work itself. This is like your lots of discussions on this, like X number of dollars an hour. You've got the replacement cost analysis. Well, this is what it would cost if we were to outsource for this. And then, let's talk about value to the people. You look at states and governments, they're asking like, well, it's 50% the work they do and 50% the person, and the kind of communities and the types of lives we're doing. If you're looking at particular causes, you're looking at the outcome of that work. And so that's the research. So we have the reporting of the work that is being done. We've got the research on how it impacts the societal health on the individual, but then also within that cause. But then value to the organization. And this is what I was alluding to begin, which is the executive looking for opportunities for value. And this is the stories within. This is potential fundraising. How many people I've talked to that are like, the executive keeps asking me, do I have the high net worth individual inside of the volunteerism base that I don't know about? Like, okay, that's an interesting thing. And then actual dollars. This is individual donations, donations in kind, and of course, what we're going to talk about today, which is dollars for doers. We want to focus today. Yes, we recognize that return on volunteer investment is multifaceted. We want to dial in on just this value to the organization. So I really care about reporting and research. This is a major area that we want to invest into, and we will, and we have. But today we're just talking about value to the organization. Specifically, can we get executives' attention by unlocking and streamlining employer donations when their employees volunteer? In fact, we don't have to invent anything new because many grants happen already. If you are already a double the donation customer, by the way, we don't have, like, I'm not being paid to do this. I'm trying to explain why did we as Better Impact integrate with double the donation? We integrated because we're trying to help the volunteer coordinator shine the spotlight through real dollars being contributed to your organization through the employers of your volunteers, because there are structures in place already for this to be facilitated. But most of the time, it's an awareness of both the grant opportunity and an awareness of what to do about it. And that is what we're seeking to solve with this. We're looking to make it so easy for you to inform your volunteers that not only would their employer do something about their volunteerism activity, but also they will donate actual dollars to the cause. So we want to take advantage of this. So 40% of Fortune 500 companies offer volunteer grant programs. 80% pay per volunteer hour, which is pretty great. And then, I mean, we track hours, right? We have all this data in the system, but 26 billion left unclaimed. Why? Well, is it a result of volunteerism lacking? Maybe, perhaps. Or is it a result of volunteers just not actually telling their employers? It's a little bit of a combination. So let's just start with, can we help volunteers know whether their employer would match a dollar for doer campaign? So a little bit, if you aren't familiar with this, this is a corporate volunteer grant program that converts volunteer hours into cash donations for the organization at no cost to the volunteer or your team. How it works right now is the volunteer logs their hours and then self-reports through a system that their employer defines. And then that's processed through the employer and then written as a donation to your organization. You do not have to go, the current structure, what we're talking about today, you don't have to go and like ask the volunteer to give money. You don't have to go and ask the corporation to give money. You only have to inform that this thing is possible and in place. It does generally look like some administrative work on the volunteer side, right? They've got to go and submit what their employer is asking for to qualify. But if I'm a volunteer, I'm already volunteering. Like, I'll volunteer a little bit more time so that my cause that I care about receives my employer's donation. So why does it go unclaimed? Well, I worked before Better Impact in a large publicly traded fintech technology company. And I ran a product line. It was an extremely niche product line. Really fun, learned a lot. And that very large organization had a dollar for doer campaign. I only knew about it because I took the initiative and I asked them about it. That was it. Now, depending on the size of the organization, depending on if they have a CSR program, if they have a CSR director, if they have an HR department that's promoting all this, they may or may not do a good job. I don't know. It just depends. Double the Donation has this information. And now we have it accessible and digestible inside of Better Impact. And all the volunteer has to do is search for their employer and find it, which is pretty cool. Now, this is a new functionality in Better Impact. We're really excited. A volunteer can identify their employer. Okay. Once they identify their employer, and there's Madison, can you tell me how many companies do you have in your system today?
Yeah, we have quite the coverage of company workplace giving programs. I think we have around 29,000 company records in our database currently. But just to underscore some of those stats on the previous slide, we're seeing 40% of the Fortune 500 companies offer these dollars for doers programs, as well as companies outside of the Fortune 500, and really no signs of slowing down. So companies continue to add new programs and they continue to be reflected then in our database.
And let's just back up a minute. If you are a Double the Donation customer already, like, okay, yay, yeah, maybe I'm preaching to the choir. But if you don't have a volunteer management system, like all of the logging of hours and opportunities, like I am assuming that everyone here already has a volunteer management system. If you don't, I would like to argue the clear and obvious case for Better Impact as the largest, volunteer management technology provider in the world. But like you're going to have a system for the logging of hours and the logging and the promotion of opportunities and the management of your volunteer base and the recruiting of that base. So inside of that ecosystem already is where the volunteer lives, and now they can indicate their employer in search. Now, if their employer is not listed, which is going to happen, again, we want to focus on the known opportunities. If it's not listed, Madison, what are the options for the volunteer?
Yeah, so if an employer isn't covered in our database for some reason, which likely would be like a mom and pop shop or a local business or something to that effect, the volunteer can still enter that employer name. And in that case, that information will just be received as plain text. So your organization would still have visibility into where they work. It's just not linked
Yeah.
currently with a record in DTD's database.
So this would be an opportunity for their organization. Let's just say you see a concentration of your volunteers all working at the same local business with no known
Mhm.
dollars for doer campaign. You now can equip, if I'm a volunteer manager, I'm now going to my fundraising department or my executive, I'm saying, hey, just so you know, we've got 15 volunteers from this local business. They seem to really like us. Like, let's build a relationship with this business for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, their staff are like involved. And so you got that opportunity. Again, if I'm an executive, I'm like, ooh, where's a story to tell? Where's a potential value? That's value. And I'm thinking it was curated because of the volunteerism department. Now, whether that comes to anything, you don't know, but those sorts of stories are so valuable. Now, if the employer is listed, then what happens is, actually, I think I have a slide about this. uh, I'm getting ahead of myself talking. Let's talk about this. So what happens? If the employer is listed, I, as a volunteer, I now see what the grant program is. But it's more than just seeing at the time of listing my employer. It now happens every time I fulfill a shift. You can set up inside the Double Donation account, like that is now connected. This is what the integration means. Now, Double the Donation will know if a volunteer has logged an hour or registered for a shift or however you've curated that experience. And it can take an action to remind the volunteer what that grant program is and also what to do about it. And so we're reducing that chasm of knowledge loss. What happens right now is I'm an employee, and when I signed up with the company in my onboarding, I might have seen a slide about the Dollar for Doer grant campaign. And then 2 years later, I'm volunteering and I've completely forgotten about that. So now we're collapsing that information. We're now making it accessible at the time when it's relevant. And you, as the volunteer manager, you don't have to do anything except set up inside a Double the Donation when you want that reminder to happen. And of course, set up inside of a Better Impact, like, your shifts, your opportunities, everything you're already doing right now, right? So it's pretty exciting, pretty cool. And the outcome of this is stories of concentration of volunteers by certain employers, known opportunities. Like you're going to be able to see, hey, here's all my volunteers. Here's the employers that are represented inside of them. And of the employers represented, X% have known grant. And these are the staff people that are involved with that. Like, that's potential value, all driven through the volunteer base that you are already nurturing, curating, taking care of, managing. Okay, now some of our customers have development teams. It depends on the size of your organization. I'm going to talk to those who do. I have spoken with so many fundraising and development teams, and their relationships typically with the volunteer department is poor, to say the least. And by poor, I mean they overlook. They're like, I'm mostly just interested to know if there happens to be a high net worth individual, or let's just say a volunteer also donates. There's a breakdown of record where there's no actual reconciliation between the two. Or perhaps worse, the fundraising team is sending emails that are like not in touch with the volunteers in emails. And maybe your organization has it all put together. I would love to hear your story if you have a good case study of building good relationships with development teams. But in this, you now have a specific story to tell for the development team to be able to reconcile, like, hey, we just got a check from AT&T or Verizon or Home Depot or name some other company inside the database. We just got a check, and that check can now be attributed to directly the recruitment work of the volunteerism department, in addition to individual donations, in addition to any other reconciliation that you're doing from maybe even large gifts from particular volunteers that happen to be really involved. So I'm excited about this, mostly because now the development team can take more interest in the volunteerism department. And as a result, the volunteerism department has more value opportunities to present to the executive team when vying for their resource asks. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is elevate the posture of executives towards the volunteerism departments by fully understanding both the value that exists, but the potential value that could be if the resource requests are fulfilled. And we are changing that narrative from volunteerism departments as cost centers into volunteerism departments as strategic arms of the operations inside of that organization. That's what Better Impact is about. That's what Galaxy Digital, now part of Better Impact, is about. And that's what Double the Donation is helping us do through this integration. I just want to do a little bit on the volunteerism experience. When they sign up for shifts, they're most engaged. When they fulfill a shift, they're most engaged. You have control over the email follow-up strategy and the timing. And that email follow-up strategy could be everything from a reminder of what the grant or Dollar for Doer campaign is with the employer, and also how to do something about it. Okay, Madison, I want to give you a couple minutes here to kind of color in the details on your end, and tell me a little bit more about like maybe some specific areas that you think are of particular interest to this group.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I think there are a couple of things that we at Double the Donation see really often as common roadblocks to organizations uncovering these dollars for doers funds. And so I want to take a minute and kind of underscore those. We actually just did a recent survey of over 1,000 nonprofit organizations in our network. And the two biggest blockers to receiving dollars for doers funds were lack of volunteer management staff time to dedicate to going after these resources. Understandably, volunteer managers are already super busy, and so dollars for doers are often something that orgs don't have a dedicated strategy around. And then the second blocker is volunteer awareness. So, Tim, I know you mentioned that you worked for a company that offered a program like this, and the only reason you were able to participate in it is because you really sought it out. And that's what we hear a lot from the organizations that we work with, is that volunteers are already serving, they already work for companies with these sorts of programs, and really just don't go through the process, aren't aware that they're eligible, or aren't sure exactly how to claim the opportunity. So that's really the crux of this integration and why we're so excited to partner with Better Impact is reducing that volunteer awareness gap, surfacing the available opportunities while volunteers are already, they're engaging in your cause, they're signing up, they want to help. And this is really just about giving them the opportunity to then extend that impact further.
Yes. Yeah, I saw in the chat we've got a lot of our wonderful customer base in Canada. Is this something like tell me about the regions where these employers in your database are around?
Yeah, great question. So, Double the Donation is available to Canadian organizations. We have Canadian orgs using our tools, and we do have coverage of Canadian companies as well. I think for specific questions on which companies that we have covered and that sort of thing, I would direct folks to connect with our team individually. So, if anyone has particular questions of like, do we represent this particular Canadian company that you have a lot of volunteers working for? Feel free to shoot us a message and we'd be happy to connect offline about that. Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact number of Canadian companies that we have covered, but I do know, again, whatever Dollars for Doers programs are out there, we're trying to represent in our database. So chances are we have it covered. And if you want like some granular info about Canadian representation, feel free to shoot us a message.
Great. So, in the spirit of connectivity, this is, I think, a good opportunity for us to say we are really interested in assisting the volunteer managers and our customers on the connection of our systems. And so, we talked about Galaxy Digital. We've got centers, and a lot of you are working with centers, and we're posting opportunities in all these different places, actively working on this. So this connection with Double the Donation is the first of many interesting and strategic connections to streamline your workflows and ultimately provide the best volunteer experience, I think, in the world. I couldn't be more thrilled about welcoming the Galaxy Digital portfolio. I couldn't be more thrilled about even just this step of integrating into Double the Donation. And as we talk about every circle of that Venn diagram, whether it be reporting, whether it be research of what volunteerism does for humans in our societies, or whether it be getting the spotlight in terms of actual dollars donated or stories behind there, each of those things all contribute into a very compelling return on volunteer investment, which the stories are already here. We just need to effectively help you all share them. And that's what we're here to support you all doing. And we do it through technology. And that's what we are. Okay. If you are a Better Impact customer and you're like, how do I set this up? We have a help desk article that is live right now. If you already are a Double Donation customer, you got to get some API keys and you plug it in. But the big message and what you all need to do is begin. It's a volunteer experience. The volunteers themselves would input their employer. So that would be a messaging, a campaign that you would do internally to your volunteers, and they would go and input their employer. And of course, you would see that information inside of Double the Donation. Of course, reach out to Madison and the team. Madison, what's the best way to get in touch with your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach us at partners@doublethedonation.com. I believe Peter just put that address in the Q&A tab as well. But yeah, feel free to connect with us. Any follow-up questions or additional info that we can get you, we're happy to do.
Okay. Yeah, we began recording this. So there was a question in the chat from recording. Definitely, certainly doing that. Awesome. Yeah, great. So if you are not a Better Impact customer, how you can get in touch with us, betterimpact.com. Say you want to talk to me. I'm happy. I love talking to customers. And some of you actually saw some names of people that I've recognized. So I'm happy to talk with you all directly. This is, I hope the big takeaway for this is whether you have, like, if you did not know about Dollar for Doers, now you do a little bit more. It's a cool opportunity. And then also understanding that our emphasis being on helping volunteer managers tell the stories of value that's being created inside their departments more effectively to get that attention. And that, I think, is going to move the needle. The rising tide will lift all boats, right? The more stories that are told, the more case studies, the more research, the more white papers, like the profession, this industry, volunteerism as a whole. If there has ever been a time in world history of where volunteerism is so necessary and needed, it's like now. So I am in the place that is so good, and you all are at the front lines, recruiting, working with the different causes and different organizations. And so we're here to serve you, and that's what we're about. And we're excited for this opportunity to help streamline any Dollar for Doer campaigns that exist, or kick off new Dollar for Doer campaign and take a crack out of that money left on the table from the corporate Dollar for Doer initiatives that are staying stagnant. So thank you all for the work that you all do inside of your local communities. We are at 12:30. I'm happy to stick around now and answer questions. I see a couple of these. How many of these companies operate in Canada? Madison kind of opened that. I don't know if you know the number that operate in Canada.
Yeah, I wish I had it off of the top of my head. I don't, unfortunately, so I'm sorry about that. I do know we have some support articles about Canadian coverage, so that might be something we can add to the Q&A tab. And then again, I would direct to the partners at doublethedonation.com address, and I'm happy to follow up on that front.
I see a comment. We have a Galaxy Digital and Double Donation customer. I've got great news. While this is live and ready to go for Better Impact customers, if you are a Galaxy Digital VMS user, we are building it out. We're in the process. So it's coming to you soon. And so you'll be able to participate. And the value would be streamlining the automation of notifications to volunteers upon shift sign up or completion or hour logged, however you curate that out. And so that's what we're working on. And that will be a great value add in that you won't have to manually remind individuals. You'll be able to get some automations in there. And also the volunteers being able to indicate their employer in the app itself for your record keeping, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So increasing that visibility both for the volunteer in knowing that they have a program available, but then for you and your team in seeing what that eligibility is and where those opportunities already exist. So we're really excited to partner with Better Impact and in the near future, Galaxy Digital as well.
All right, couple other questions. Will Double the Donations be integrating with Volgistics? I don't know. Is there a cost to activate Double Donation account if already a Better Impact customer? Yeah, so you would have to become a customer of Double Donation to use, like, what they provide is the database of employer incentive programs. I don't have that. And they also have the tools and systems for automating the communications of how to take advantage of those grant programs. And of course, Madison, I'm sure, has like, oh, and we do these other things too. Like, certainly reach out and learn more. But this is really to say, hey, you probably can fund this through the grants that are going to be generated through this, but really we have a lot of customers already that are mutual. So automating that experience is pretty great.
Yeah,
okay. With regards to grant payment to the organization, the volunteers volunteering with, does the grant have to be used for certain things? I don't know. Madison, have you ever seen like,
yeah, I can take this question. I would say that's not typically what we see. So of course there is variation company by company, and that's part of the value in having the database that covers these specific workplace giving programs is you can see exactly what each company's requirements are. But that's not a common requirement of Dollars for Doers programs. So typically once the grant is received, that's really your funding to do with as you please. So no, that's not typically a requirement.
All right. And we knocked out our questions. Very efficient lunch and learn. I don't know. It's lunch for me. It's 12 noon Eastern. Thank you all for joining us today. This was fantastic. You can reach out to me at Tim at betterimpact.com. Quite simple. Tim,
Yeah.
Tim at betterimpact.com. If you got any questions, you can, of course, go to our website, betterimpact.com, and request information. It's been a pleasure talking today. And we should do this more often, Madison. I thought this was cool. Let's get some stories. So my call to action is if you do something about this, I want to hear your story. So I want to be able to shine the spotlight on how you leverage this and give it in a couple months. Let's get that story and we'll do some practical stories on that as well. I love that.
Yeah. Agreed. Thanks so much for having us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Bye.